I've always wanted to talk to you about your childhood and all of that because we've exchanged emails over the last year and we've both sort of said, "Hey, have you tried this and have you tried that?" And you know that I'm passionate about parenting and you know people healing from childhood. And I'd never really asked you what your childhood was like, and then you started to kind of like tell me a few things, and I was really shocked because I guess from an outsider, you always think that someone who's successful and has done all these things, that you've written so many books and you speak in front of people, and you're definitely a leader in your field, and you just, I don't know, people just always think that someone like that
See,
has come
yeah.
from a really good, solid childhood. But you told me a few things, and I was really quite shocked. And I just thought, well, your story and sharing it with people would be very powerful because so many people are in pain and they don't know what to do about it. So through, hopefully our conversation today, you'll be able to not only, I guess, shock some people, but help people as well. Um,
I think I think it's probably really common though. I mean, the book that I just read, which was "Will I Ever Be Good Enough," which I really
so
recommend
good.
if people have issues with their mums. This
Yep.
book here, um, you know, she says there's two types of people who, when they have these kind of patterns with their mums, there's two types of people, and one is the underachievers, but one is the overachievers, because you're always trying to prove something, because you don't, in childhood, you don't have that sense of validation. You don't have, I mean, that's what the book is called. Will I ever be good enough?
Mm,
So it's feeling like you're never good enough as you are, and you're not okay as you are. So you've always got to prove yourself. And I think it's probably actually, when you look at it, it's probably quite a lot of people who have gone on to do a lot in their lives have come from that kind of background where they haven't felt. I never felt accepted as a child. I never felt like it was okay to be me. I never felt like it was okay to be me. So I was always seeking ways that I could validate myself, and also I was always seeking new experiences that made me feel like it was okay, because
mm,
if when I woke up in the morning I didn't feel like it was okay.
mm. Can we explain to everyone watching what your childhood entailed and how young were you? Like, what's your first memory of knowing that things were just not right?
I don't think it's a memory so much. It's a feeling, isn't it? It's a feeling that you're encoded with, if you like, even when your mum is pregnant with you. So my mum wasn't married, and that was 1970, and that was a very bad thing to do back then. So she had to go to a convent and have me in secret. And actually, I've told that story a lot, and it seems like a bit of a story, you know. And then I met a guy a couple of years ago, and as you do your chatting, I said, "Where were you born?" He said, "Kentish Town." I said, "Oh, I was born in Kentish Town." He said, "Yeah, in a convent." I said, "Oh, I was born in a convent." And he was born in the same convent, and he checked in with his mum, because my mum wouldn't talk about it. I've never even tried to talk about it with her, but he checked in with his mum, and she was telling him all these stories. And because they were seen as like sinful women, when they went in there like in their last weeks of pregnancy, and then they had the baby, and then they stayed there for the first, I don't know, maybe a couple of months, but they had to work to they took him washing. The nuns took him washing, and they had to do all the washing and the ironing and stuff while they were in the last stages of pregnancy.
Oh my goodness, it's the
Actually
last
having
thing
new
you feel like doing.
babies. So they're kind of penance, I guess, I don't know, and to kind of pay their way. So that was kind of that, that was what I was encoded with at birth, was that I shouldn't be here. I was a mistake. It was wrong for me to be here. Also, I think my mother had a lot of resentment, a lot of anger. I think she felt like I'd ruined her life, like it was my fault somehow. And then, of course, I've got all the stuff from my dad, because he wasn't with her. So then there's all that rejection and abandonment, and not being worthy, not being lovable. So, from both sets of parents, I had a really deeply negative, just that I was undesirable, and that, that I kind of was bad even for existing. It
Wow,
was
that's so
definitely what I felt.
intense. I can relate
And
to
then
a lot of that, but at the same time, I think
my mum
you.
got married when I was 5 or 6. She got married when I was 6. And my stepdad was, we hated each other. So I can't really say from his point of view. Maybe he didn't hate me directly, but maybe he just hated his whole situation in life, but then I was the brunt of that, you know. So then it got even worse then, because all those feelings of being worthless, there was actually someone actually really acting that out for me in my life, you know, that I was not important, and uh, uh, yeah, not just not a good person. I guess they always made me feel like I wasn't a good person. They had children together, so then their family became the center of the house, and I was kind of just an inconvenience. I felt like I was just kind of there to you know, I was irritating because I had different needs from the babies. You know, I was a teenager, and everything had to revolve around the babies. And I was just, you know, when I had children myself, it really helped. In some ways, it really helped me understand, because it is really stressful when you've got little ones, you know, and they didn't have a lot of well, they didn't have any disposable income. You know, it's, you know, like everyone, it's just, you know, struggling to make ends meet and pay the bills. And you know, he'd had a difficult time. He'd lost his first wife. She died quite tragically, and my mum had obviously had a difficult time of it. And so you can see, like, with all these stresses and having to work all the hours and look after the kids, you can see how it must have been really hard for them. And no wonder they were in pain, and no wonder they were transferring that onto me. But then at the same time, also when I had kids, it made me even more like, because also when I was a teenager, then I started blaming myself, and I started thinking I must have been really bad. I must have done something wrong, and I should try and seek their forgiveness. I should try and make it up to them somehow. And when I had kids myself, I was like, how could you be like that to your kids?
Yeah,
Like, how, no matter what pain you're in, how could you be so just unsympathetic towards your children? So although in some ways it helped me understand where they were coming from, in other ways it made me less tolerant of how they'd been to me, because I just thought I could never be like that with my,
It
I
makes you
could
realize
never,
that makes you realize
huh?
there's something really wrong with them and the
Yeah,
way that they did see things or did not see things, and that it's, for them, it's almost like a really serious mental illness, um,
yeah,
that they just have, they're, especially with the narcissistic personality type, they just have no idea they are like that, and
yeah,
everything else is everyone else's fault, and they can't do anything to change their behavior. And of course, they use everyone else as a scapegoat. And in your case, that was you.
yeah. I
Mm.
think it's particularly that generation as well, that post-war generation. I think there was a lot of pressure on them. You know, they're the most materialistic generation, aren't they? Because they were, it was really all about, okay, finally we've got to a point of material. There's a standard of material wealth that's prevalent in society, so people can have a TV and a car and a house and go on holiday and all that kind of stuff. But that became the most important thing.
Yeah.
Whereas before that, it was still more about community and people looking after each other, because the material aspect wasn't there. But because they were the first generation to really have that kind of material security and stability, then having the house and the car and the holidays, and that your children looked nice and went to a good school and all that, was more important
That's right.
than how it was feeling.
Yeah, yep. And it's funny, I sometimes watch a bit of TV, and I must say I quite like watching that Downton Abbey, um, which is set that kind of the beginning of the post-war, I guess. And yeah, they had this part in one of the episodes just recently where one of the staff was brutally raped, and people were saying to her when they found out who did it, "You must go and report them." And she just kept saying, "No, I can't do that. It will ruin my reputation." And back then it did. Even if someone else did something bad to you like that, it would make the whole family look bad. So people would keep these things to themselves because they didn't want to bring shame on their family. And I think, yeah, it probably started, that kind of time, the way that our parents are in terms of their generation is picking up on all these things through society as well, and then just dumping them on us. But I'm hoping now that with our sort of generation, because we see all the problems that have happened with raising children, there's now going to be a massive movement with what we need to do to repair people, because I just think society is a direct example of, yeah, the loss of connection of being real parents.
Yeah, yeah, definitely,
Um,
definitely.
so you went probably very similar to me in your teenage years. Um, did you finish school, and was school extremely painful for you, or did you enjoy it because you got away from your home life?
No, well, I had a really I had a really strict school as well. I went to a really good girls' school.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really repressive at school and it was really repressive at home. So I left home at 17 and I left school at 16 and kind of went wild
Wow, yeah. So you
for
you
a
let
good
you, you
like
say
6 years
you actually
really.
left home, so you like ran
Yeah.
away from home, or just cut ties with your mum and stepdad?
Uh, she, yeah, I would say they kicked me out. You know, obviously nothing things up and right, but effectively they kicked me out. It was actually really good though. I was really happy because I'd been really unhappy at home, obviously, and my mum gave me money towards food every week, and I got a little bit of income support, and I had housing benefit, so I had my rent paid, and I had like disposable income, which you never have when you're a
Yeah,
teenager,
true,
and I
true.
had freedom. It's
Yep.
actually one of the best. I was, I was really happy at that point. Obviously, I was going through stuff emotionally as well, but I had
Mm.
freedom and I was having a lot of fun. So,
Yep, yep.
in terms of the emotional side of things, I guess I just wasn't connected with it, and maybe that's what made me go so extremely off the rails, if that's what you want to call it, because I was kind of shut off from that emotional side of things. But in other areas, I was having a good time. So I felt really glad actually that I was released from it as soon as I could be, and also I feel really grateful that in my life overall I kind of I think everything happens for a reason, and I think not having strong relationships with either of my parents has actually made me more courageous
Yeah,
because I just I'm not afraid of stepping out and doing things, and I'm not afraid of what people are going to say so much because I come from this place of thinking that no one cares about me and no one's looking at what I'm doing and no one's paying attention to what I'm doing, because that's my childhood pattern is no
mm-hmm.
one was looking at me, no one was paying attention to me, no one cared about me, so I'll just do stuff. Whereas I think if I was more aware of um, like often I see people who are walking this kind of path and they have a better relationship with their parents, and then there's always kind of like a conflict between, oh, my mum doesn't want me to do this, but I want to do this, and do you know what I mean? There's all
Yeah,
like things over raising the children or your life path, whatever it is, and I never had any of that, so I
yeah.
just went out
Do what
and
you
did
want.
it, and so it has made me very yeah, not scared to kind of do those things, to take those risks. Which I think if I'd had a better relationship with them, I'd be more worried about upsetting the apple cart.
Mm.
So I think in a way, everything. Yeah, I think we choose our life path. We choose
Yeah.
what families
Well,
want
I
to
know
be born to.
I'm grateful for the things that have happened to me, but at the same time, it's still left a pretty, um, bad mark in terms of I still find it very difficult to accept love and really give it. Not
Uh-huh.
necessarily to Lola, but to my husband, I'm not very good at it at all. So, have you found that as well? Like having
Yeah, and
romantic
that's
relationships is tough.
yeah, that's fascinating as well. I think is that I'm 43 now, and I really started waking up to spiritual stuff when I was about 17, 18. So
Mm-hmm.
what's that? It's 25 years of being aware of being on a spiritual path and doing the work on myself. And still, every year, I uncover more layers of all this stuff, and it's like it is really a lifetime journey. It's
Yep.
like I've been doing the work on myself longer than I was unconscious. And it was only in my childhood, so it's like, yeah. I think I don't know. Maybe when I get to 60, then I'll hit a point where I feel like, okay, I've uncovered all the layers. But I just, at the beginning of this year, I felt like I was going into a lot of my mum's stuff and my grandma's
Mm.
stuff. So I felt like I was really kind of going into uh, genetic patterns rather than
Wow.
just my patterns that I'm holding.
So you were
Um,
able to find out like how your grandma was brought up as well, because obviously she must have caused your mum's, narcissism.
No, my grandma was really lovely. It was my granddad, I think,
I did it.
that my mum, yeah, my mum got that kind of coldness from my granddad. My granddad was a really cold person. My grandma was really, really warm, really loving person. She was actually the only person in my family that I connected with.
Mm-hmm.
But she'd had a lung cancer, so that's all about not being able to breathe, isn't it? It's about
Yeah,
feeling, because she was such a warm person in this very cold family.
yeah,
I think her pattern was, uh, yeah, just having to suppress her emotions, and that she couldn't say what she was feeling and thinking. And so just looking at all that stuff with holding stuff in, my mum really holds stuff in, and I think that
Do
that's.
you do you know how she was to your mum? Because it's so like the way we treat our kids and the way it affects them is so complex. Because I'm sure you've read stuff too. You can do too much of giving gifts or giving not enough discipline, and that can also cause someone to grow up feeling very entitled, very narcissistic. Could it
I
be that
think
your grandma perhaps didn't discipline your mum well, or like, do you know how she treated her?
I think it was more that my granddad was a really dominating person and a really overbearing person, and so my grandmother really revolved around him,
Yeah.
and that probably my mum then had a resentment of the fact that women couldn't be. That was definitely what she passed on to me, was that women couldn't be powerful and women couldn't be uh, strong or free or happy or independent or all those kind of things. And so when she met my biological father, that was for her, that was a time of, she was in her early 20s. She was at a time of stepping out and trying to kind of express herself and trying to be it's the 60s. So it was all very much about liberation and freedom. And then look what happened. It's
Yeah.
the most awful thing. And so that kind of proved to her that you can't be, as a woman, you can't be empowered, you can't be free, you can't be strong. And so then she passed all that on to me. And when she saw me being different and not taking that pattern on, then all her resentment around that and all her beliefs, she would say the weirdest things to me. And actually, if you read this book, it's actually hilarious,
So good.
because
It's
the
quite
things
funny,
these
some
would
of the bits. Yeah,
say.
yeah.
He's like, but then I can imagine my mum saying that, things that really are so irrational and so crazy, but I don't, want to give examples particularly, but things that are just like so, well, yeah, so not any based in truth, but
Yeah.
obviously coming from this really deep
And like,
place of hurt that she carries.
yeah, just crazy making stuff as well. It's really interesting because, I mean, I've always been fascinated with, how the mind works and what causes it to become, unwell as such. But I always thought, you know, diagnoses like schizophrenia was something that were born, that you had some kind of genetic problem. But after reading some research, apparently, was it over 50% of people that get diagnosed with schizophrenia all have some kind of abuse from their childhood, whether it's
Right, yeah.
physical, sexual, um, or all the other kinds of abuse, which to me, and I think to particular researchers, shows that you can create schizophrenia, um,
Yeah,
and especially if you have parents that are so controlling, where they do not allow a child to have their own opinions, and whatever you say, they just completely crush, they completely destroy. You can imagine that that would cause someone to go crazy because they
yeah,
have to be able to get their own feelings around what they're thinking, and if that creates some kind of splitting within the way the mind works, it kind of to me makes sense that
yeah,
if you are being treated a certain way, that will cause your brain to just not function right.
yeah,
um,
yeah.
uh, yeah, so when do you, for your childhood and your teenage years, do you look back at a certain period of time and think that was when I was at my bottom, like my rock bottom of I could not get any lower with how I was being treated and how I felt?
Uh, yeah, but yeah, I mean, probably actually when she kicked me out and those first few months of living with friends was really, I was definitely in a real kind of hole. But I think that's interesting because always when you look back on your life, it's very hard to separate the good times and the bad times. We kind of have this instinctive need to go, well, this was a good period, this is a bad period. But there's times when some things can be going really well, and then other things. So, like I said, at that point, I was actually having a lot of fun and quite happy on one level, while at the same time dealing with this huge kind of emotional hole, which, as I said, I think it's a lifetime's work, kind of repairing that hole, because it's my emotional hole based on what happened to me in my childhood, but then it's also connected with the family patterns, as we're saying, and it's connected with the wider patterns of just how women are treated in our society. So, you know, until the whole of society learns to treat women in a different way, I think we'll always be doing this repairing work. We'll always be doing this, this just being able to look at ourselves and see. I think a lot of what happens as women is that we're taught that pleasing other people is more important than pleasing ourselves. And that's what I said about my grandmother, is she was really an archetype of that, is that she didn't even know how to please herself, because everything was about making the family happy. And then my mum kind of became very different because of that, but still on another level, she was always she would always do everything for everyone else and complain about it all the time. So she would do things like take on being in the PTA, you know, the school, or doing the brownies, or all these extra things that was volunteer work, but she would then complain all the time about how tired she was and how much she had to do. But it was that pattern of always being there for everyone else and not even thinking about your own. So that's a lot of what I've learned about in my adulthood, is how do I get that balance? Because my tendency is to do that, is to make everyone else happy and then not even acknowledge that I have feelings in that situation, and then come out something feeling really drained and really exhausted and depressed because I've put everything away and I haven't made sure anything's there for myself. And if I don't make sure anything's there for myself, no one else is going to. It's because I'm not going to attract that in. If I have on this deep level this belief that what I want and feel doesn't matter, and I'm going to attract in people who mirror that to me, aren't I? Who don't feel that what I want and feel matters. So I have to find that real, honest belief in myself before I can attract those kind of people into my life. And I think, it's not just my pattern and my mother's pattern, but it's quite a wide pattern among women. Just to, to the objectification of women, which is. Luckily, not luckily is the wrong word, but thankfully, getting more attention in the media at the moment. But just the way as women we're taught how we look and how we behave is really, in some parts of society, is the only thing that matters. I was sitting on the train a couple of days ago, and there were some guys sitting next to us, and they must have been in their early 20s, and he was talking about a gal that he started seeing, or something. I don't know, what guys are like chatting. But all he said was she was really pretty, and he said that a couple of times. She was really pretty, and there was nothing about her personality or what they talked about. But obviously, that was all that mattered to him, was that she was fit. And so that's what we internalize. That's what we internalize, is that as long as we look the right way and behave the right way, everything will be okay. And to actually address what's going on a deeper level is and then it becomes an ugly thing, because if you don't address it for a long time, it does become like this can of worms. That's what I feel like with my mum, is there's this whole can of worms, and that's why she can't look at any of this stuff, because it's been buried for so long that it's really, really toxic. So we just, the more we hide from this stuff, the harder it is then to confront it, and the more it does become a big issue. And we can do that on wider levels, and we can project that into our relationships with our partners and our children, but we can also do it on really subtle levels as well, just like we're in the jobs, so all the time we're fighting against this programming that tells us that we're not allowed to be, it's not okay to be women, I think.
It's so true. And
not to be a real woman, a real woman in touch with your emotions in an empowered way, that's not allowed at the moment.
Obviously, with parenting, we pick up on stuff from both of the mother and the father. So you got a double whammy, basically, with not Did you ever know your real dad?
I have met him.
Yeah.
We were in contact, but we don't really have a relationship. And I think I got it. I got a triple whammy, if you like, because I got rejected by my biological father, but then I also got rejected by my
Yeah.
stepfather. So I really deeply I was worthless to men. And actually, when I read this Carol McBride book and looked at the stuff she was saying, I actually think I did so well landing up with Chris, my ex-husband. We were married for 7 years, and there was a lot that wasn't perfect about their relationship. But considering the patterns that I'd grown up with and where I was coming from, I think I did really good ending up with him. I could have been in a far more. He wasn't abusive at all, but I could have been in an abusive relationship quite easily, considering what imprint I had from my parents. So I think I did pretty good.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely.
Sorry, I can hear Lola crying. Can I just go check and see what's going on? I'm not sure if she's Nat, is she all right? Sorry about that, hun. Yeah. So when
Do you want to turn the light on? It's getting a bit dark.
Oh yeah, God, it is, isn't it? So yeah, how long were you married to Chris for?
We were together 8 years.
But you're still obviously on really good terms, aren't you?
Yeah, it was really hard for a long time. Divorce again is one of those. It's it's a similar experience actually. It's on one level, it's really painful and really, it's a real grieving process. Definitely a divorce, and probably in a way even harder than being when I left home, because you're much more conscious of what's going on. But then on another level, I felt very freed by it and liberated by it. So it was, yeah, it was definitely one of the most difficult things of my life, the divorce. But yeah, we got kids together, and I think that's one of the things is that we're both we both really, really want the, like every parent, but we really want the best for our kids. And sometimes I see parents like arguing over their kids and stuff, and I just couldn't ever do that. We've both been very united over wanting them to be happy. So I think that's what's made us really work at being friends, because we want that for the boys. So
many people.
Yeah, he's
Kids can be really used as a pawn, so to speak, in divorce situations, and that can cause so much.
Maybe it's because I didn't have good parenting. I didn't have relationships with my parents, but I really think it's important that they have a good relationship with their dad. So I really want them to be with him, and I really want them to see him. And kind of what he does with them when he has them is secondary, because it's just important that they spend time with him. And I can't understand people that would want to have their kids not seeing the dad at all, because I think they've got to have that kind of male input, haven't they?
That's right. So what sort of therapies and stuff did you do, and what ones sort of didn't really help, and what are ones that have been extremely powerful and effective?
Yeah, I think for me mostly it's just I always try and be aware of my thoughts. So I always try and just examine what's going on, and it's more of an internal thing rather than any particular practice. Is more of an internal thing of just kind of watching those patterns, and when all the time relationships with men and women come into your life to show you things, don't they? So I'm a big one for taking responsibility for everything, and if someone comes into my life that's mirroring something I don't like, then instead of blaming them for their behaviour or being angry with them or seeing it as their fault because they've treated me badly in a certain way, I look at what's going on with me that I attracted that in. I think with the mirror thing, I think it's really interesting because people think of a mirror like, so if someone's being selfish towards you, then it's because you're really selfish. That's the mirror. But a mirror reverses things, doesn't it? When you look in a mirror, it's reversed. So if someone's behaving really selfishly towards you, it's not that you're too selfish and you need to look at that. It's that you're not being selfish enough. Because if you were thinking of yourself more, then you wouldn't have this person in who would be such a selfish person in your life, because they wouldn't be able to inflict that on you. Do you see what I mean?
So interesting, yeah.
So yeah, I think you just learn from life, you don't you, everything that happens. And I said it's the small interactions with people in day-to-day life, as well as the bigger ones that help you see what your patterns are. And it's all, that's why I got into the food and the yoga, because having done my wild stuff in my late teens, early 20s, it became very apparent to me that that was a kind of dead-end path, and either I could get seriously into drugs, which I never had any intention of doing, but quite a lot of people around me were doing, going into darker patterns, or a lot of people were just cutting off from that entirely and kind of giving up on freedom, if you like, and going back to the real world. And I didn't want to do that either, I guess, because my real world, there wasn't really anything there to go back into. There wasn't any solid family structures, or because I was so young, there wasn't anything I'd already built up to go back into. So I still wanted to stay living a liberated and just a free life, I guess. But I was looking for ways of how I could achieve that state of feeling happy and engaged, but without resorting to doing things that were harming my body. And that's when I got into the food and the yoga. So I started doing more food and yoga, and both of those things really help keep me connected with, because I think we have two sides of ourselves. We have who we are in our soul, in our hearts, however you want to define that, but our kind of true self, our eternal self. And then we have the part of us that is just this body that was born, I was born in 1970 and I've lived in London my whole life and all that kind of stuff. And that how that person relates to the world is often at odds with how you feel like you are inside, isn't it? Because you're expected to do certain things, to maintain certain roles, just to fit in with society. So trying to bring those two things together, so I feel like I'm always being my truth, I'm always being authentic, I'm always being real, and I'm always acting from this place of deeper truth in the world, which sounds quite simple to say, but when we live in a world that is so fake and so everything's topsy-turvy, isn't it? Everything's topsy-turvy. So you're always going into a world where everything's stood on its head, and trying to flip everything back to what's real and what has value, rather than getting caught up in the games and the dramas is everywhere.
So obviously Christmas is coming up, and it's a tough time for a lot of people because it should be all about family, but it's not usually, or it does mean the family comes together and a lot of fights happen and people end up in tears and just have a really crappy day. Or I guess for you, it's been that, I guess before your kids came along, Christmas would have just been you hanging out with some friends, or maybe just you. Is that right? Or
no, because I used to try and go and see my mum, because I was trying to make it up. I just don't like Christmas at all, really. It's just commercialism, isn't it? It's like I was saying before. It's materialism at its worst, and
so
all the values of our society now being about what you have rather than who you are. So I try and be aware of the seasons, and that as you come into winter, it's naturally a time for slowing down and reflection and thinking about what the year ahead is. So I definitely respect that. But Christmas, whereas when I was a kid, it was a time for slowing down, and the shops all shut for 2 or even 3 days, and everyone just kind of united, didn't they? Even though we're watching TV, we would all watch the same TV programs. It was definitely a time of peace. But it's not anymore. The shops close. People are still rushing around like crazy. So it's no wonder everyone gets sick in January, because of all the stress and the build up to Christmas. So I just try and avoid it, really.
So you've got 3 boys?
Yeah.
When you were first pregnant, was it scary to you to know that you were going to be a mum, because of not having a healthy sort of background to kind of copy, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I wouldn't say scary is the right word, but definitely when I found out I was pregnant, I didn't have any confidence in myself, and I kind of I had to wake up to the fact that I could be a good mother, because my initial reaction was very unconfident.
Yes.
And I had very difficult births, and I think that's probably linked to a lack of confidence in being able to.
All three were quite tough, were they?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's partly, I think some people just easily pop out babies and some people don't. My mother's pregnancies were all long pregnancies, so 42-week pregnancies, and long labours. So that's definitely something that's, in my genetic pattern, but they were all very long, drawn out labours, which didn't, none of them went easily. So I think on an emotional level, it's definitely because I didn't feel prepared for motherhood. Yeah.
And have your boys met your grandma? Sorry, your mum?
Not for a long time. Less than 10 times in total, probably.
And what's she like with them?
Because she wouldn't talk to me when I got. She just doesn't. When I got pregnant, she wouldn't talk to me. She told me I was ruining my life. Yeah. One example is, I think when I was pregnant with one of them, I can't remember which one. It was at a point when I was trying to kind of make it up, trying to make it all okay. And I asked her, and I think it was when I was having Ethan, and I asked her if she'd like to have Reuben when I went into labour, because she only lived down the road at that point. It was like maybe 10 minutes drive away, And I thought that was a nice gesture to kind of, make her part of my life and everything. And would she like to have, it was only one night, wasn't it? But when I went into hospital to have the baby, and she said, only if it's at the weekend when I'm not working.
Wow, that's so bad. Oh my God.
Okay, Mum, I'll just make sure I give birth on a Saturday. Do you want any particular time?
Hey, sorry, Lola's crying again. But what's happening? Nat? Sorry, I just got she, poor little darling. What's wrong? Oh, she just woke up before and she's not very happy. Poor little thing. Oh, yeah. So I just think, from what I've seen, you've done an amazing job with your boys, and you're always like taking them to cool places, and you seem to have such a really close bond, but I'm sure it's not in a way that's unhealthy. Like you're their mum, but you're their friend as well, but in a good way.
Yeah. Well, they're really independent. All of them. I've raised them to be really independent and really, like I encourage them to do things for themselves as much as possible. So they help around the house and they help make their food, and it's very much for them to be. That's my whole thing, is for everyone to be more empowered. I feel like we're really, really so disempowered in our culture, and so I want to raise empowered individuals. And what's interesting is Ethan's just hitting 14, and in the past few months he's been expressing a dissatisfaction, because in our home educating he's been expressing a dissatisfaction with being, they go out a lot. We're not at home much really, but he said he wanted to do something else. So we're looking at either this local Steiner school, or there's a it's called the Self-Managed Learning Centre. Ruben went there for a bit as well, where it's like a home education thing, but they do it all in a group together. And so for older children, it's a really good thing. But this is at 14, and I noticed at 14 was the same age as Ruben, when he's really started needing something else other than just being in the home. So I'm sure you're familiar with the Steiner philosophy of that the children need to be with the mother until they're 7. So children in Steiner don't start full time education until they're 7. I actually wouldn't be surprised, as we do more research into childhood in the coming decades, coming generations, that if we find out now that actually it's right for them to be at home till they're 14, because that's what's felt really natural to me, and that's what's felt really right. A couple of weeks ago, about a month ago, I was working where I had to leave home early in the morning and come back, in the evening. And it was just kind of like a normal day that most working adults would do. Like, it wasn't exactly 9 to 5, but it was kind of those sort of hours in the day. And it was so stressful.
Yeah.
And it just made me really recognise how hard it is for parents if they're in that model where they're, you know, working full time like that, how you can be there for your children. You can't, because if you've got all your energies going into work, you can't be there for your children. And so I've always made those choices where, you know, if it's a choice between my career or my kids, I'll always choose my kids, because I think that's something you can't get back. And you know, they are getting older now, and I am able to do more stuff and give it another 5 years really, and they'll hardly be needing me at all. So you know, it might have been what, like 20 years out of my life, but then I've still got decades and decades where I can do what I want. Like, why would I not want to take that time out to really be there for them? Because you can't ever get that back.
No,
you know. And I think, you know, when I look back on my life, I'll always be really happy that I never missed out on any of their childhood, and I really felt like I got, like I always say to everyone, I feel like I squeezed all the juice out of it. You know, and I got the most out of it I could, and we had some really great times. And I don't want to look back and regret that I wasn't there or I didn't do that.
And it, you know, as you and I both know, the attachment of children is so important. And you know, I think the problems that occur when someone is not attached. So, you know, if a mother is putting their kid into daycare, you know, as soon as possible, even though they have to do that because, you know, let's face it, society's so expensive now that it's getting even harder to be a stay-at-home mum. It's almost a luxury to be able to do that. But with the research that's been shown, you know, over the last sort of, I guess, what, even 30, 40 years, and it's just coming out more now, that, you know, putting kids into daycare is very dangerous because it can, you know, cause so much depression, and the kids just don't turn out to be happy individuals later in life, because kids should not be removed from, you know, the mother at such a young age. And being, you know, to give a child someone else to look after is not how it's meant to be. But as I said, sadly, that's what many people have to do.
Or at least if the child can't be with a mother, at least it should be with like an auntie or a grandmother or something like that. But you know, I don't understand that about schools as well, because when I'm doing home education with the boys and we're doing school books, it's really hard to get 3 children to sit and work. Like, how you're meant to get like 20 or 30, it's just impossible. So it would be the same in daycare. You just physically cannot give the child an attention it needs if you're looking after 10 or 15 children. It's not enough with one.
So yeah, what things have you tried to help unblock, you know, patterns of behaviour or the way you were thinking? Because I know, sorry, Lola's obviously not liking the attention being brought away. Did you do the family constellations? No. Sorry. Okay. Oh, I might have to go in a minute because she's not. Oh, she's not happy. Oh, poor little thing. That's Lola. Doesn't like being away from mum.
I have to have conversation a few times. Family conversation is really wonderful practice. I got a lot out of that, definitely. I don't think there's really that much specific stuff I've done. Maybe that's why it's taken me so long.
I'm only really, for me, it was just having Lola that made me realise all the issues I've still got. Not necessarily with her, but with my other half. So I've really, you know, decided to try and delve as deep as I can into allowing myself to be vulnerable and to try and have a healthy, like, marriage, because I don't know how to be in a normal relationship. I've just known abuse after abuse because that's what I was attracting, and had the same kind of self-hate messages going on, and it was almost like that was normal. So I kind of liked people that were abusive to me. And now that I'm with someone who's loving and kind and good, it's very weird for me, even though we've been together for like 7 years. So yeah, that's my big problem. But Yeah, I just think parenting is obviously it's a topic that, there's so many schools of thought of what's right and what's not, and it's countless books have been written about them. But yeah, I just think if people really understood more about how personality disorders are formed, because it always comes down to parenting. If as a society we knew that and we put more focus on the mother or one caregiver being at home constantly, and people had the right skills on what to say to their children, and how to do certain things, I think the whole world would be incredibly
Yeah.
different. Because you look at all the the crazy people in government and all these wars that are starting, they're people that haven't come from grounded childhoods at all.
Yeah.
Because a good, healthy person doesn't want to kill anyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
People say to me a lot, I should write a book, and I don't. I will write a book one day on it, but I don't really feel like I can write a parenting book because we're learning all the time, aren't we?
yeah.
But what I would really like to write is something more autobiographical and make it really about the woman's experience, the mother's experience, because as you said, there's so many parenting books, but it doesn't look at what the how things are for the mother, and that's,
Yeah.
I think, the biggest challenge that I've found is that we are expected to be look like supermodels, uh, maintain a beautiful, perfect house, have a successful career, and have brilliant children, and have a good social life. And it's like that's impossible. And so, as a woman, how do we navigate all these different expectations and all these different roles? Because what we're pressured in is the superficial ones of having the career and neglecting the children, and then, as you said, to be a stay-at-home mum, and really when you've got more than one kid, when you've got one kid when they're little, it's a full-time occupation. When you've got more than one kid, it's definitely a full-time occupation,
Yeah.
just being a mum. And so, but that's seen as not acceptable, and that's a luxury, and that's lazy somehow. When every mother will tell you it's the hardest thing they've ever done.
Yeah.
It's like,
Oh, yeah.
toddlers is like so exhausting, and yet it's not, it's not value. So I think you totally agree with what you're saying, but also society needs to shift and look at women and put women in a more important role, and put women as at the heart of everything, rather than pushing us always to the sidelines and telling us we have to just behave in a way that pleases men and behave like men to be successful. But there's no space for actual womanhood in our culture at the moment.
Yeah,
So
so
when that shifts, then the whole family thing will shift around that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to say to the people watching about, maybe there's quite a few that can relate to what you've been through but are feeling a bit stuck in freeing themselves from all of that kind of pain?
I think you mentioned self-love, and I think that's really the key of it is, it's self-love, and it's so hard to love ourselves because we're taught all the time that, as I just said, if you're not doing all these things, you're not good enough. So I struggle continuously with this feeling of I'm not good enough, because I'm like, okay, I haven't sorted out the garden. The kids are waiting for me now. There's 50 emails, people waiting for me to answer that I haven't answered that friend's text. So we're always feeling all the time I'm not good enough. So it's self-love, and it's just shifting that around and going, I am good enough, and then I am trying my best, and I am a good person, and reframing it within ourselves, because when we reframe it within ourselves, then, as you said, we start attracting that to us. But if we're always carrying around those feelings of that we are deficient in some way, and we don't deserve to be loved, and we don't deserve what we need out of life, then society's going to keep perpetuating that. But it always comes back to us being the change, and so we have to change our inner thought processes, our inner thought patterns, and just feel that, because that's what a woman is. A woman bees, isn't it? So we are good enough as we are, and we are good enough just being who we are, and giving our love in the world. And just because we can't get everything done, I haven't got time to get my legs waxed and buy the kids new clothes and write an amazing new book and do all those things. That I'm not a failure, because I'm good enough just as I am.
Yeah,
And
definitely. It's
That's,
funny.
yeah, I
You
think
know, obviously
just,
with what you've been through, it has obviously had its, you know, tough time, negative, so to speak, aspects, but also with the you know, the fact that you are such a go-getter and you do what you set out to do. If you hadn't have had aspects of your mum being that way to you, your life could be completely different, and maybe not necessarily in good ways, because you might be leading a pretty mediocre life. You might, you know, you might have a good relationship with your mum, but would you be doing what you're doing now? Probably not. And therefore, what would you
I,
choose if you could go back in time? Would you choose to be doing exactly what you're doing
yeah.
now, or you know?
I think also it's made me very humble and it's made me very grateful because I don't expect people to like me. I don't expect that people will, yeah, I just don't expect people to like me because of that family childhood pattern.
Mm-hmm.
So then when people are nice to me, when people are kind to me, I really appreciate it so much and I genuinely appreciate it. So that I think coming from that place of gratitude and because I always understand, I think I said this to you before, but I always understand that someone has a choice
Yeah.
and they don't have to be close to you. And I think maybe if I came from a more solid family background where my parents were really like always paid me lots of attention, I might have more of a like I would expect that people would uh, I don't know, do things for me or be nice to me. But as it is now, I'm much more humble and much more just actually genuinely really grateful because as I said, we all have a choice. We all have a choice to do the kind thing and do the right thing, or to be disconnected and it always I'm really appreciative when people are in their hearts because a lot of people aren't.
Yeah, it's so true. I want to
So true.
ask you one last question, if that's all right. Now, um, you don't speak to your mum anymore, do you? Like you've sort of pretty much cut off all the
Well,
ties.
that's interesting because I decided to. I'll just keep it brief, but we're hardly spoken in 10 years. And then I did see her in January, and then I just decided I'm not going to bother again. And then she actually wrote me a card, and it actually said, "How are you?"
Really? Wow,
Which
that's
is
quite
like,
big. That's very big,
it's very big.
isn't
It's
it?
very big. So I'm going to
Wow.
see her next week, I think, and we'll see how that goes. But I think, again, that's a good example of how that's come from me being totally then in my truth and in my power and just going, I'm not going to try anymore. And because I've
Mm.
totally come to that place of self worth and self
Yeah, it's
knowledge,
funny,
then
isn't it?
she's meeting me in that place.
Yeah. Because I think that, you know, there's something very powerful, and this is what I would like to say to some people out there who do have a really tough time with their parents. If, you know, they know that it's something that they cannot change themselves, I do think sometimes the best thing a person can do for their own sanity and health is to sever ties, whether it's for a year or a few years or for
Yeah,
life. If you
yeah,
keep putting yourself back in that situation, it just causes you so much anger and, you know, sickness as well. I just think that if you just can't change them and you can't
yeah,
change yourself to sort of deal with it, the healthiest thing is to walk away.
yeah,
Not
definitely.
for everyone, of course, but I think there's probably quite a few people that don't and they should.
Yeah, it comes back to that thing of being the change, isn't it? And you have
Mm.
to do the work on yourself. And if you're still in those relationships and you can't do the work on yourself because those people are pulling you back into those patterns all the time. So yeah, if that's what it takes for you to heal, then I definitely think that's the best way to go. And then like you said, it's been 16 years since I've seen my mum on her own. There was a 16-year gap, or 15, probably about 16 years. So that's how long it took. But I think this is another thing about society is we have all this time pressure, and I'm expecting to live to over 100,
Yeah.
and I'm expecting to live in really good health
Yep.
and have a good quality of life. So actually, if it's taking me 20 years to work this stuff out, I've still got another like 50 years to
That's
go
right. Yep.
to, so 20 years is nothing if you're expecting to have 100 years of good quality life,
That's
is
so
it?
true. That's it. And you just never know what happens, um, to any individual, really. Everyone's capable of great change, and
Yeah.
yeah, I always see things happen, and it constantly surprises me now.
Yeah.
And yeah, also, I guess if you have that kind of mindset where you think, oh, that person's never going to change, they're never going to change, if you keep saying that, then they probably won't, because you're
Yeah.
almost telling the universe to not allow them to change.
Yeah.
Um,
But you can't expect them to change either.
no,
You have to change.
exactly, and that's the hardest part. I find one of the biggest difficulties in my life is relearning how to have open communication with people, especially about the sort of topics that I'm interested in. You know, having a doctor as a father is like a recipe for disaster, because all the things that I'm into are just sort of the opposite of what he thinks. And we've had some terrible times talking about things, but what I want to do in the next year before we move back to Australia, because we're going to leave next year, I need to try and practice the way I communicate with people about these kinds of things, because that alone can probably make a situation that would once be very volatile turn out to be something that is much more stable and doesn't explode.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, my biggest thing is, yeah, just controlling the way I speak, and then dealing with the way they respond as well is key too. But yeah, it's life so, like, it's amazing, but it's also very hard, isn't it? I always just think, wow, we so see the dark and light all the time with
Yeah,
everything
yeah.
that we do. Um, but thank you so much for, you know,
Thank
talking
thank
about
you.
these things, because I know it's so personal, and you know, a lot of people don't really want to talk about this stuff with hopefully thousands of people that are going to watch it. But yeah, thank you very much, and yeah, I'll put some details below about how they can find out more about you.